Hi, I'm Joan, the designer behind Paper Moon Knits. This video is a series that I'll be doing to support some of the techniques used in my Knots and Dots Pullover. The video series is debuting for the knit along that I'm running in collaboration with LoveCrafts for Knots and Dots. The KAL runs from October 27th through December 31st, 2022. I hope you'll consider knitting along with us, but if you're just here for the video content, welcome. I think you'll find many of these techniques useful in lots of areas of your knitting. Knots and Dots begins with 2 cabled shoulder panels. In this first video, I'm going to be demonstrating the alternating long tail cast on. You'll want to use this cast on when your knitting begins with knits and purls on the very first row, just like the cable panel for the sweater. So most of you already know the long tail cast on. It's a pretty common cast on, and it's usually my go-to cast on. So I'm going to be using slightly bigger needles and a heavier weight cotton. The yarn used for this is 100% cotton. This is 100% cotton too, but it's just a little bit heavier, only because I want you to be able to see the techniques. So I'm going to leave a tail. The cable panel itself is 23 stitches, but I'm just going to be demonstrating first regular long tail cast on. So I usually begin my cast ons with a slip knot. I know some people just don't, they just give it a twist, the yarn a twist. I like to do this for stability. I like the fact that all of the stitches look a little bit more uniform. That last stitch doesn't get swallowed up by other things. So to begin, you start with a slip knot, which I think all of you can do. And then you have the tail yarn, which is what should be at the front of your work. And the yarn coming from the ball should be at the back of your work. And simply the long tail cast on is you take your index finger and your thumb, you put it between the 2 strands of yarn, and you make a slingshot. So just in and lift, cock your wrist slightly. So now we're going to go under the front loop of our thumb yarn and over the front loop of our back yarn, and then just pull through. Don't pull so snugly, because what'll happen is you'll have a hard time getting into that cast on when you knit the first row. So again, it's, sorry, getting ahead of myself. It's under the front loop of the thumb, over the front loop of the index finger, and through. So I'm just going to do that a few more times so I can show you what the first row is going to look like. So under the front loop, over the front loop, through. Under the front loop of the thumb, over the front loop of the index finger, and through. Okay, so now when I turn this over to work the first row, the cable panels are knit flat. You can see that I have a series of what looks like purl bumps here. You can see the purl bumps. Now this is fine if your first row is purl. This is the way to do it, because those purls will just stack up one on top of the other. However, if I want to do knits on the first row, this is probably not ideal. So let's do it. Let's take this out and let's try long tail backwards. So I'm going to start the same way, make a slip knot. I'm going to put the tail yarn in the front. I'm going to switch that around, and the ball yarn in the back, and I'm going to do it backwards. So think of it as if you drive, backing out. Driving in reverse is not the same as driving forward. So you have to kind of get your brain around it first. So you start the same way, into the middle of the yarns and slingshot it out, but instead of going in the front strand of the thumb and the front strand of the index finger, you're going to do this backwards. You're going to go into under the back strand of the index finger and the back strand of the thumb and pull it through the back loop. So back strand of the index finger, back strand of the thumb, pull it through the back loop. Back strand of the index finger, back strand of the thumb, and pull it through. Back strand of the index finger, back strand of the thumb, pull it through the back loop. And I'm just going to do a few more so you can actually see what it looks like on the front of the work. So when we turn it, you'll see now that instead of getting those purl bumps, what I've gotten now is loops of yarn that are slanting down and to the right. So they're slanting down and to the right. And when I open them up, if I can open them up a little, you'll see there's no real bumps there. Now, one thing to remember when you're casting on is that, I'm going to turn back to the cast on now, is that the first stitch you cast on is really the last stitch of the first row. And the last stitch that you cast on is the first stitch of the first row. That's going to be important when we do the alternating cast on. So let's take the simplest form of alternating cast on, which is the 1x1 rib. The Knots and Dots Pullover doesn't have any 1x1 rib, but I think for demonstration purposes, I'd like to show you that before we get into the more complex version of knitting and purling for those cable panels. So I'm going to take this out again. I don't really need to take out the slip knot, but I'm going to take it out. I'm going to make the slip knot again. Now, a knit 1 purl 1 rib, a 1x1 rib, usually begins and ends with a knit 1. So that slip knot will be the knit 1, the last knit 1 of the row. So we need a purl stitch to appear on the front of our work. So to get a purl stitch to appear on the front of our work, we're going to do the long tail cast on in the regular way, which is under the front strand of the thumb yarn, over the front strand of the index finger yarn, and through the front loop. Knit and snug it up, but again, not too much. Now we're going to we need a knit 1 to appear on the front, so we're going to have to do this backwards. Let me put this down so you can get a little bit of better view. Under the back loop of the index finger yarn, over the back loop of the thumb yarn, and pull it back through the back loop. Now we do need a purl in the front, so we're going to do it the regular way. We need a knit, we're going to do it backwards. We need a purl, we're going to do it frontwards. We need a knit, we need to do it backwards. We need a purl, we need to do it frontwards. And we need a knit, so we do it backwards. Now let's turn it over and see what we have. Let me do a few more for you so you have a better view. Okay, so you can see now that there are alternating purl bumps, and alternating strands of yarn here. So the first stitch is a knit, the second stitch is a purl. You can see that bump, then you can see the knit, then you can see the bump, knit, bump, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. So when we work that first row, and I want to show you the first row, when we work the first row of that ribbing, you can see that the purl bumps sit over the bumps and the knits don't have a bump at the bottom. If I do a few more rows, you can see even more so. It kind of looks seamless, or like you didn't cast on. This is great. This is a great thing to use for the edges of hats or the edges of cuffs. It just makes everything look so much better. So you can see that the purls are really sitting over those purls, and the knits really just have that strand of yarn that's just coming down to join the purls. So how about our sweater, which is Knots and Dots? I'm going to pull out the chart here so you can see what it looks like. The cable panel is 23 stitches. Now in the pattern, I provide the charts and the written directions. So don't get panicked if you don't use charts. You can use either one, it's fine. I like to use charts only because I get to see what my work is going to look like. So if I look at my swatch, you can see that although the chart is much bigger than the actual swatch, you can see it has two cables down here. Then it crosses in the middle here. These go out and come back in, and then more cables here, and then coming back in. So I just like to use the charts better. But if we look at the first row of this chart, we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purls, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knits, a purl, a knit, a purl, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knits, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purls. So let's cast on in a way that we're going to be able to work the cast on, so in the alternating cast on method. Now again, you don't have to cast on this way. I just think it looks better, and that's my suggestion to you, the alternating cast on. So since it's only 23 stitches, I really don't need that much of a tail yarn. I don't love to have long tails because they interfere with my work sometimes. I'm going to make the slip knot. And remember, this slip knot here is really going to be the last stitch of the first row. So the last stitch is over here. So although the first row is worked on a chart from right to left, I'm going to be working the cast on left to right, because when I turn my work, I'm going to go back and do this first row right to left. So I need to start with 5 purls. This is going to count as one of them. So if you want purls up here on the front of your work, you do long tail in the usual way, which is under the front loop, over the back loop. under the front loop, over the front strand of the back loop, under the front strand of the thumb, over the front strand of the index finger, under the front, over the back. And I have my 5 pearls. Again, do not pull too tightly. You will have a difficult time on that first row if this cast on is too tight. So we've done these 5, and now we're going to do 5 of the knits. So to get the knit stitches to appear on the front row, we're going to do this backwards, again, like backing your car out. You're going to go under the back loop of the index finger, over the back loop of the thumb, and then back through the back loop and up. So one more time. Back strand of index finger, back strand of thumb, through the back loop. Back strand of index finger, back strand of thumb, through the back loop. Back strand of index finger, back strand of thumb, through the back loop. And we need one more. Back strand, back strand, back loop. So we should have 10 stitches now. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those purls, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those knits. So now the next 3 stitches are purl, knit, purl. To get a purl on the front, we're going to do long tail in the usual way. Front strand, front loop. Then we're going to do a knit, which is back strand, back loop, and then a purl, front strand, front loop. Now we have 5 knits. So we're going to do 5 backwards, back strand, back loop, back strand, back loop, back strand, back loop, back strand, back loop, and one more back strand, back loop. And then to finish, 5 purls. So we're going to do long tail in the usual way. Front strand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I turn it to look at that first row, we're going to have 5 purls, 5 knits, a purl, a knit, a purl, 5 knits, 5 purls. So let me work that first row for you so you can see it. I'm a continental knitter. If you're a thrower, an English knitter, you can work these the way you're comfortable with. Those are the 5 purls. These are the 5 knits. Purl, knit, purl. And we're working from right to left. We're here now. 5 knits. And 5 purls to finish. And when I look at that row, you can see the purl bumps are sitting over the purl bumps. The knits are sitting over those strands. The purls are sitting over the purl bumps, the knits, and the purls. So I hope you find that helpful, and that's how I'm recommending that you cast on for those shoulder panels.